There's something really powerful about acceptance, and there's something powerful when you say, "We're all messed up in here, and we all know it, and we're just gonna accept each other, and we're gonna start working on it. We're gonna roll up our sleeves and figure out how do we move forward."
Hello, and welcome to the Gift of Need podcast. I'm Jude Trang. I'm an author and observer of human need in society. And this podcast seeks to address the overlooked power of need and how it shapes our behavior, our relationships, and society. And I hope to whet your appetite and get you thinking about your needs and how they're not burdens, but how they can become opportunities and gifts. And I do that with great guests from a variety of backgrounds and careers, like my guest today. So Glen Fitzgerrell is with me today from Chicago, and we're going to be talking about walking alongside people who have made some pretty big mistakes in their life choices and have ended up in difficult circumstances such as prison or living on the streets, and how, through love and care from others, those tragic situations have led to some amazing and lasting life changes and spiritual growth. So, hi, Glen.
Hey there. I'm excited to be here, and, I'm also a fan of your writing, so this is a big honor for me.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And today, folks, we're going to be discussing why we need to learn spirituality from unlikely people. Glen and his wife, Jane, live and work in Chicago, and for over 3 decades, they and their amazing team of volunteers have been serving in one of the most difficult areas of urban society. That is helping ex-cons and gang members and people in recovery make positive changes in their lives and how to find new paths to live their lives on. So, Glen, what led you to start working with this segment of society? You know, this is the people that most of us choose to look away from when we see them
Mm.
sitting on the side of the street or having their hand out, either from disgust or viewing them as less than, or because we don't know what we could do to actually help them.
Yes, and I think the word "help" is the big key word there. I think if you know how to help people, and that's really what my book is all about, learning how to be helpful to people. In fact, I tell, pastors and ministers, "Don't use the word ministry with me, just use the word help," because ministry can mean anything. But if you know how to help people, then it changes how you look at things. You start looking for opportunities to be helpful and to transform other people's lives. So, a while back, I started learning how to build guitars. That's like my hobby, and so I would go to pawn shops, and here's this broken down guitar that, nobody wanted and what have you. But I could see, oh, there's really not that much wrong with it. And if I make a few improvements, change some things, renew some things, it'll play great. And I can give that as a gift to somebody or what have you. So you start looking for potential if you know how to help people.
Right. Well, and I think that's exactly it. That's why we tend to look away and go, we have a lot of street people. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona, and a lot of people come out west to live on the streets because the climate's fairly good, even though I don't know how they stand the summers. But, I'm just so hesitant to hand them a buck or $10 because I feel like all I'm doing, it's not what they need. It's not going to help
Right.
them in the long run. So Mission USA is the Chicago-based nonprofit organization that Glen and Jane started decades ago that serves people in need, those in recovery and formerly incarcerated people and people formerly involved in street violence. And the bridge is the centerpiece of their strategy. It's a weekly meeting that provides a community of encouragement and growth, as well as a connection point for further resources. It's a bridge. So, Glenn, will you tell us more about the bridge?
Well, it really came out of, when I first came to Chicago, I was working with gang members. So the way that that worked is I started in prison ministry originally in Texas, and I came out to Chicago to do prison ministry, but then to work with them on the streets afterwards. And the obvious way to do that was to just use the gangs because they're behind bars and they're on the streets. So uh, I could I could lead someone into a spiritual relationship with God behind bars, and then they would call ahead to the fellas in the neighborhood, and someone would be waiting for me when I got there, and mom would have food going, and someone would watch my car, and all of a sudden I was pretty spoiled, and life was good, and I had all the business I could lay my hands on. And as much as I enjoyed just kind of indulging in that, I realized we need to plug all these people into something larger and, help them to find not only a church home, but find people that they can connect with and ways that they could grow, develop new relationships with, new mentors or people who could employ them and open up a whole different life for them. So we started the bridge with that in mind. So we went out and visited churches to see if they would be a good fit for that. We even now we visit about 10 churches for every one that we pick. So we're extremely picky. We want the best of the best of the best. So we assembled a rotation of pastors. So every week we had three different pastors that come up that again we've handpicked, and they rotate through each week. They're each given 10 minutes total to give their message. They complain about that all the time. The people have never complained. So, uh, but they each have 10 minutes, and they have to preach on what our people are struggling with. So they write down what they're dealing with, they put it in the box, and then the pastors have to preach on that. So what that does for our people is they can hear different pastors have a different perspective on that challenge that they're dealing with, and they might feel like I kind of connect with this particular pastor in the way that they're communicating, and we have different parts of town, different preaching styles, all of that. So it's kind of like a buffet of choices. There's no bad ones there. It's just who do you feel like you connect with. And then afterwards, we have a meal. And so the pastors can then get around and invite people to their church. Since we have a different volunteer team each week, brings in a meal for us to do that. But everything is acclimated to, as you mentioned, ex-cons, people in recovery, and people coming out of a gang lifestyle. So the music, the everything about the service, it's for them. And we've been doing that every Tuesday for about 21, 22 years now.
Wow. Well, the need for being part of a community is a recurring theme with my guests on the podcast. And, it's regardless of what area of life you have need in, we're meant to be in community with others. And why is it imperative for the people who come to the bridge looking for help with their lives that they get plugged into a community and specifically into a church community? It obviously you created the bridge and that is the center of your work. So what
Mhm.
is the imperative point here?
Well, I think everybody needs community, and I think we've become we can communicate with each other more easily, but that somehow has isolated us from each other. So we have to find that community. I think people who are dealing with recovering from an addiction, they need community just to stay sane. They need to be able to talk about their struggles and hear other people talk about theirs. So I think putting the spiritual component in that 12-step program is really a big part of what we try to do. to kind of perfectly dovetail with the 12-step programs that they're involved in, and then plug them into churches who may not, know a lot about recovery or whatnot, but we're kind of covering that, that specialization for them. But I think the there's a great power in being with other people who are working on the same thing you're working on. If you're having a certain, if you're trying to be a better parent and you're struggling with that, the power of being with other parents who are being honest about their struggles, and all of a sudden there's a connection that you share with each other. There's a support, there's love, there's encouragement, there's wisdom, hopefully. But you can cry together, you can pray for one another, you can, just help each other out. Let's just go have dinner and give ourselves a break here, or whatever those things are that give us that support. And I think all of society needs more of that.
Yeah. I mean, I find it from, I've had guests who are artists, guests who are in some kind of sports field, in science, and everybody needs other people that they can relate to, because we weren't meant to live in isolation. And like you said, the problem with the technology and everything that we have that's just right at our fingertips, uh, it is not real community. You're connecting to people, and yeah, that's nice. It's kind of like writing letters, but it's very different than being with people. So, well,
Yeah.
after 35 years of working with gang members and prison inmates and people in addiction, Glen has written a guide to ministering to anybody, anywhere, and it's entitled More Church Than Church: What I Learned About Spiritual Growth from Ex-Cons, Gang Members, and People Recovering from Addiction. And I'm going to hold it up here. You can get it where books are sold.
Yeah.
It's really a manual, is how I would describe it. So, Glen, what's the story behind the title, More Church Than Church?
Well, the story behind the title is that when I started in prison ministry right out of college. I was volunteering there, and then they offered me a job to be the chaplain of that facility when I graduated. So this has kind of been my whole professional life. And I thought when I started with that, we would have a chapel service, and we had like a Sunday school type time afterwards. But my going into that, I thought, well, this is going to be kind of um, a somewhat sad shadow of a real church service. This is going to be our best imitation of what can you do, and that sort of thing. And I found it to be far more alive and real and authentic and messy and fun, and um, the kind of thing that you just were instantly drawn to, and, nail my feet to the floor. I don't want to go anywhere else. This is how I want it to be from now on. So in many ways, it just became more like church than church. You'd go to church and say, this is kind of boring compared to, we just have people just. A few years ago, I was preaching and with our people, and I said, you know how you do, you say, well, it's like this, you know what I mean? And one of the guys who'd not been in church that much said, no, I don't know what you mean. Can you give me another example? And it's like, yeah, I can. I could, I gave him another example. I said, how's that? And he's like, yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, it's just, again, it's less culturally Christian for sure. I mean, to the point of being stripped bare of church tradition altogether. It's very bare bones in that sense. But it is organic, and it's what they want it to be. One of the things we do at the bridge is every week we read a description of what the bridge is, to just make sure new people recognize that they're wanted, that and we tell them we're not going to preach down to you. We're glad that you're here. All of us are having struggles of our own. You're in the right place, all of that kind of thing. We're about progress over perfection and all of that. And at the end of that thing that we read every week, it says on the PowerPoint, "You're always welcome at the bridge." And like the first week we did it, they all just shouted at the bridge in unison for whatever reason I can't tell you. And every single Tuesday since, that's what they do. No one ever told them to do it. They just want to shout, you know.
Yeah.
And so it feels exhilarating to just let it grow whatever way it wants to grow and let it be what it wants to be.
I love how you open the book with your first principle for ministering to people's needs. Chapter 1's title is Listening is Good Ministry, and you wrote, "There's more ministry in listening than in speaking. The act of listening helps people feel understood and valued. When we listen more than we speak, our words have much more weight and help us to actually understand the struggle." That kind of goes along with what you hear people say, or parents will say this to you. Why do you think God gave you one mouth and two ears, right? So,
Yeah.
and I wish that when I was younger, I would have been taught this, and more importantly, have been able to incorporate it into my life, because the zeal of being a young Christian or a theologically trained one, you get whatever knowledge you have, it tends to make you think that you got to pass on everything you've learned, right? But you have found that that is usually detrimental, and you suggest that knowing the right questions to ask is often more important than having all the right answers.
Yes.
I think that is one benefit of being an older person that I can embrace now. And I really enjoy asking questions and learning more about the people I encounter by listening to them.
Yeah. No, I think that's and let's be honest, I learned to ask questions instead of just preaching all the time because uh I did a lot of preaching all the time and nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to hear any of that. So out of desperation to say, well, you talk then. What's going on here? But what I found is the more I listen, the less I need to say because they figure out a lot of stuff for themselves, and there's it's a different thing when you can ask someone a question and in a certain way kind of gently guide them to that realization that they need, because if it comes out of their mouth, they're going to own it. If I say it, it's a tug of war between us. I don't know if I want to do this Glenn's way or my way, that sort of thing. But if they say it, you can't be defensive about it because it's you, and you tend to own that. And the other thing is, it gives you some confidence that you can figure out some of your stuff. So I want to build that into people. I want to make myself less essential in that sense of, I want to have a relationship, a discipleship kind of relationship where eventually people will come up to me now and say, I had this problem and I know what you're going to say. You're going to say this, this, and this. And so I got that. But there's this other thing I couldn't figure out, and I'm stuck on that. So you got to tell me something with that. And, I might just pull that one little obstacle out of the way. And then they're like, okay, I got it. I got it. I can figure the rest out. So that confidence that they're doing it, and I'm just assisting in that. I'm just smoothing it out, or again, just one little pebble in the cogs there that I'm pulling out, and then they're springing forward because God is pulling them to Himself, and they want to grow in that way. They don't want to be stuck. But the other day I was having a conversation with the guy at our service, and he was just red faced with anger. And he said he's in this rehab, and they're telling him he can't go and get a job. He really wants to start working. He wants to make his own money, and he wants to go back to normal life, whatever that means. And he came to the waiting period where he was going to be allowed to get a job according to the rules of the facility. And his counselor sat down with him and said, I'm not going to approve you for that. You need to do more work on you. And he said, I was just so mad, and I'm yelling, and I'm and he's getting, red face as he's talking to me about, I'm a little intimidated, he's a big guy. And he says, I don't know. Yeah. And all that I said was, why do you think he did that? And he said, because he knows if I got a job, I just have all that money and I go buy drugs and I'd ruin my whole life. And he's only trying to help me and keep me from ruining everything. And I know that's what it is. So fine. Okay. And he went away telling everybody about all the brilliant stuff that I told him about his situation. I didn't say a thing. I just asked the question. It wasn't a very complex question either. So I have maybe an outsized reputation for wisdom when it's really just knowing that right question that opened him up to figure it out for himself.
Yeah, I've heard this. I think the saying is that, don't tell people what they need, let them tell you what they need. And I think it's also a way in which, like, having dialogue instead of monologue. It's I think there's so much of Christianity because there are so many great teachers that everybody thinks they need to, have a monologue and then get a response. But for relationships, you don't build relationships with somebody when they're speaking to you from a podium. You're getting information, but what people who are in need are those relationships and those encouragements that will help them personally. And so, you know, in your book, you highlight the contrast between acting culturally Christian and a real growing relationship with God. And this is something that I see as a particular problem at this particular moment in America, because it is so easy to act like a Christian here. And we have so many people trying to make laws to make people act like what they think a Christian should act like. And so you can have that external lingo and behavior down without having first done the hard work of character building. And, this is the heart of The Gift of Need, the book that I'm working on, and this podcast, because I really am convinced that acknowledging our neediness is necessary for true spiritual, personal, communal, society, health, and growth. But there's a caveat here. It takes willingness to be vulnerable. So I want to ask you, what do you think makes your contingent of people able to be transparent and vulnerable about their weaknesses?
Mm. Well, I have the easiest job in the world. I need to specify that, and I'm spoiled rotten. Everybody that I work with they're so thankful and loving, and I'm just just going about normal society. I feel I'm not as spoiled as I am in my day job. So I need to specify that. But I would say one of the ways in which I'm spoiled is most of the people that I work with at one time or another have participated in a 12-step program. And in those 12-step programs, someone will, chair the meeting, as they put it, and they will take the mic if it's a bigger room, or just speak up if it's a smaller circle, and say, hi, my name is John. I'm an alcoholic. And so that acceptance, 100% acceptance of what the struggle is that you're working to deal with on a daily basis, what the temptation is, what the thing that we're trying to grow and move on from is up front. So when we constructed the bridge, we realized we needed to dovetail with that. We needed to have that same spirit.
Mm.
I remember a few years ago, one of the most powerful and well-known pastors that we've had at the bridge stood up and an older gentleman, and he stood up and said, I'm a sinaholic, and you're at my meeting right now." And everybody was like, "Oh, it's like they settled into the seat, like, okay, this is good.
That's right.
I'm home." And but the funny thing is, as I mentioned, we have these host teams that come in, excuse me, and provide the meal for us. And often those host teams are cultural Christian people from the suburbs who, never been in the city, never been in this kind of crowd. And the funny thing is, they like it more than our people do. They love the vulnerability. They love the acceptance. We just accept everybody. I'll tell you a funny story on that is one of my favorite things in life. At one point, we don't own our own building. We just churches open it up and we use it on Tuesday nights. And at one point, we were on the west side of Chicago in this kind of older historic church, and they generously allowed us to be there on Tuesdays. But there were a couple of old ladies, bless them. There's always a couple old ladies in church that just they weren't sure, and are they going to destroy the property? And just a lot of hard questions. And the pastor invited them to come on a Tuesday night. And when I showed up, he said, I'd really like it if you could go over and talk to him, and it's be nice and smooth over whatever. I'm not the right guy for that, honestly, but I was going to make my attempt. So I go in, and there's two of our ladies that are by the door greeting everybody. We give them a big greeting at the door, big hugs, and we just pounce on them when they come and let them know that they're welcome. So two ladies are standing there, and I said, and I looked at the church ladies. Our ladies said, those two ladies sitting in the back row are new. And I said, "Oh yeah, I was aware of that." And they said, "We told them, you're welcome at the bridge, no matter what. Like, even if you're a crack whore or you're a prostitute, they accept you because we were prostitutes. So if you guys are prostitutes, that's fine too." So these two old church ladies
Uh-oh.
being taken for prostitutes, just an assumption that they're prostitutes. And I'm like, "Oh, this is over now. I mean, I won't be able to repair this."
Right.
So I go over to these ladies, and they're sitting, and like I say, along the back wall. So I kind of knelt down next to them, so I'm on their level, and I'm going into my deep apology. And the service hasn't started yet. I need to specify that. We're just coming in and fellowshipping before the service. Before I could say a word, they grabbed me and said, "Why can't our church be like this? There's so much love in this room. There's so much acceptance. We don't have this kind of acceptance in what we're doing. And why can't we do more of this?" Of course, I was tempted to say, "I think it might be because of you. You're, you're the ones that
Wow.
are being uptight and stuff." But it doesn't matter. I agreed with them. There's something really powerful about acceptance, and there's something powerful when you say, "We're all messed up in here, and we all know it, and we're just going to accept each other, and we're going to start working on it. We're going to roll up our sleeves and figure out how do we move forward."
Hmm. What a great story. I love it. Well, I think we're going to need a second part here because there's so much more to talk about, Glenn. So, folks, thank you for joining us today with Glen Fitzgerrell and Mission USA. And as we've talked about how the needs we all have for change and spiritual growth can become opportunities and gifts as we are transparent and allow others to help meet our needs with their spiritual gifts. So in this way, the needs of individuals, communities, and society can be met, which in turn brings joy and fulfillment to us all. So thank you, Glen. And let's have a part 2. You can find Glen's book, again, More Church Than Church, at any bookstore. And check out Mission's work at missionusa.com, or find Glen on Facebook. I'll have that down in the show notes. The great music you're hearing was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda at Kubanda Music. You can find his wonderful and creative and energetic music on any streaming service. Ray Engineeri is my engineer. He's in 3rd Street Productions in Tucson, Arizona. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow me on my Substack page, free, and leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. Bye.